as an HR practitioner, you've probably had to deal with people that come across as overly sensitive or inclined to taking things personally. Now, the behavior of these kind of people can have a significant impact on team dynamics. So you might be wondering, how do you actually deal with people like this? So why do people take things personally?
Well, this is what we call a boundary issue in applied psychology. So a boundary issue is where we fail to distinguish between the different parts of ourselves or the different levels of communication that can happen. So essentially what happens in communication is we can either take a message into our personal self, we can take it into what's called the intimate zone, which is the sort of relationship that you have with your friends and family who you allow very close, or you can keep it in the professional zone. And what happens when someone takes things very personally at work is they're confusing those levels of boundary. And so they're taking a message like, for example, feedback that is intended to be about their performance or their behaviour in a very professional sense. They take it in as a personal insult and they take it well and truly into their personal zone, and that makes them upset.
Okay, so can you talk to us a little bit more about those three boundaries? You mentioned personal, intimate and professional. So how do you distinguish between each of those?
So the personal zone is the part of yourself that only you know about. It's the information about your feelings and your thinking that you don't disclose to anyone else, and no one else has the right to impact on that. So it is essentially the core of who you are. And you don't share that with anyone else. And that's the part of you that is really important for keeping you emotionally safe. Mm-hmm. The next level is the self that you show to the people that you trust and feel safe around, people like your loved ones and your intimate friends. It's the sort of relationship where you disclose some of your feelings and thoughts, and you trust that the other person is going to treat those with respect, and you trust that they're going to empathise with you. And so we allow our intimate friends and family into that zone. Right. It's usually not appropriate that we're having that style of conversation in the workplace, but sometimes people will get confused because they have a friend that they work with and the boundaries get a little bit blurred. So for example, when I was supervising in my first role as a supervisor, my best friend ended up working in the team next door. I came back one day from lunch and the entire team was sitting around Becky as she told them the story about the time we went camping as children and I nearly burnt the entire farm down by lighting a campfire. Everyone thought that was fantastic except me, because to me that was part of the intimate zone being disclosed in the professional zone. So the professional zone is the level at which we communicate as professionals. We talk about the job, we disclose some aspects of our personality, but there are other parts of our history or our self that we don't want to disclose.
Right. So what can HR practitioners do for people to help them draw the line between personal and professional?
Well, that can be a difficult one because sometimes it's bordering on the role of a counsellor. So it's really important that you see your role simply as being to provide information that the employee might be able to use. If they struggle to use that information, it might be worthwhile referring them to a counselling service or your employee assistance provider. But you can do the beginning of the task by explaining to them what boundaries are, why they're important, and how they can go about the process of distinguishing between personal and professional. So sometimes it helps to draw 3 concentric circles. So in the middle we write personal, and then in the second circle we write intimate, and then in the third circle we write professional. And we explain that the employee can take a message in as deeply as they want to. They're in control of those levels. So we can then draw an arrow going into the personal and say, if you take a message into the personal, it's quite likely that you'll have strong emotions around it. And then we draw an arrow into the intimate and say, if we take a message into the intimate, it's likely that we're going to feel there's an implication for the relationship. And then we draw an arrow into the professional zone and we say, but if we're just dealing with the professional, all we're talking about is behaviour and how we can change behaviours to get better results in the workplace. So that often helps people to go, oh, I've actually got some control over what I take into myself. Another technique that can be quite useful is to ask the employee to imagine that there is a wall between them and the other person. And it is a see-through wall which is very strong. And they can choose what gets in through that wall and what they choose to keep out. And so what they're doing there is they're making a conscious decision about which messages they allow through that wall or that boundary.
Oh, that's a great tip, because it's actually visualization that you can actually imagine and put yourself in that situation. That's fantastic. And also, how can you tell whether coaching or counselling is the best option?
That can be tricky. Basically, if the staff member cannot let go of intense emotions, we've probably got a situation where there's more going on than just a simple boundary issue. And that would be an appropriate situation where you might want to refer the employee on for counselling. If the person is responding to the psychoeducation that you're doing and they're making really good progress in terms of thinking through how they can shift their approach to boundaries, then it's probably appropriate that you continue coaching them.
Eleanor, thanks once again. It's been a really, really instructive conversation. I'm so looking forward to catching up with you next month. What's the topic going to be?
So we're going to be learning how HR practitioners can coach employees in the skill of active listening.